Welcome to the presentation of the service game called Sucre. My name is Roger Waldeck and I am a researcher at IMT Atlantique, a technological university in France. Sucre was developed in the context of a European Erasmus Plus project called DECART. DECART is devoted to designing higher education curricula with properties of agility, resilience, and transformation capacities. One objective of the DECART project was to develop tools for improving the resilience of curricula, and Sucre is one of these tools. It is not only a serious game for transmitting pedagogical content on resilience, but also a decision tool for decision makers wanting to improve the resilience of their own curricula. Sucre can be played both online on Miro or on-site in a material form. All information can be found on the website of our project. Resilience is the capacity to absorb, cope, and adapt to both intrinsic and extrinsic events and to rapidly return to some normal state of functioning or to adapt to a new normal state. Different resilience capacities correspond to this definition of resilience. Sucre deals with preventive capacities, here for a university curriculum to be better prepared for facing future crises or transitions. Preventive capacities are implemented as a three-step process to be played by players. Step 1 is on building situational awareness. This step responds to the question, resilience to what? Player will learn to become aware of crises and transitions and to identify impacts of this crisis or transitions. Step 2 is about identifying vulnerabilities. This step responds to the question, resilience of what? Player will learn to evaluate the impact of crisis on the curriculum resilience by identifying the vulnerable components of a curriculum. Step 3 is about building adaptive capacity and addresses the question, resilience how? Player will learn how to prioritize crises with respect to their dangerosity and for the problematic crisis to define an action plan to become better prepared. Sucre is composed with 5 types of cards and 5 boards. For cards, there are trigger cards representing crises or transitions, impact cards, and action cards. There are 39 trigger cards with 3 categories: competition and economy, environment, and technology. There are 44 impact cards with 4 categories: curriculum, university conditions, staff, students. There are 43 action cards representing action known to improve resilience and categorized into 4 categories: teaching and learning, curriculum structure, curriculum context, quality culture. Players can create their own cards thanks to blank cards. In addition, tokens with signs are provided. 2 other types of cards are: first, the curriculum ID canvas, used for generating new curricula, instantiated into curriculum ID cards. There are 9 curriculum ID cards. Thanks to the curriculum ID canvas, 6 curriculum ID cards were provided by the DECART partner institutions and 3 others were generated using ChatGPT. In addition, 5 boards are used in Sucre. For step 1 of the game, there are 2 boards that can be used alternately. Either player can use the trigger and impacts board or the consequence scenario map board. Step 2 has 1 board called the resilience board. And step 3 has 2 boards used in turn. First the vulnerability board, then the solution board. In addition, help material is provided in the form of a recap card and a user manual. There are 3 ways to play Sucre. 2 basic scenarios can be played within a 2-hour session. And the learning objectives for players will to become aware of a resilience process. In the basic scenario A, each team picks the same curriculum ID card. Therefore, all teams defend the same curriculum. In this scenario, it is advised that each team plays triggers which are different from the triggers of the other teams. Therefore, in scenario A, a larger pool of trigger cards may be analyzed. Also in step 3, teams will join their efforts and collaborate together to solve problems caused by the problematic triggers. In the basic scenario B, each team defends a different curriculum. In this scenario, teams act independently of other teams. Said otherwise, each team is not concerned directly by the gameplay of the other teams. Therefore, this scenario is recommended for shorter sessions of less than 1 hour and a half, where the game master wants to avoid discussion between teams. The advanced scenario has for objective to use Sucre as a decision tool. This scenario is recommended for program leaders whose objective is to improve the resilience of their own curriculum. In this scenario, a team may create its own curriculum ID card using the curriculum ID canvas. It is recommended for a whole day session, but Sucre can be used all year round by program leaders who want to stress test their curricula. The game master chooses the team size. Teams of 3 to 4 players, up to 6 teams are optimal. In the basic scenarios, the game master can provide players with a selection of trigger and ID cards, from which player can choose. In the advanced scenario, players may define their own curriculum ID card using the curriculum ID canvas. There is collaboration in teams, and if the game scenario A or advanced scenario is played, also between teams. The objective of Sucre, and therefore players' goal in the game, is to render a university curriculum resilient by playing the 3 steps. Let's start by playing step 1. For playing step 1, players need trigger and impact cards, the trigger and impact board with the plus, minus, and equal tokens, or the consequence scenario map board. Let us start by using the trigger and impacts board. Each team chooses a trigger card to be analyzed in step 1 and place it on the board. Then each team determines all the impacts from the chosen trigger card on the university curriculum. Player places the impact cards on the board. In addition, each team places a negative or positive or equal token on a given impact card representing respectively negative, positive, or undefined impacts. For example, a team may have chosen the trigger card "Competitors develop new promising curricula." Our first impact for the university curriculum is that the number of national students at the university may decrease. This is represented by a negative sign on the impact card, number of national students. More than one trigger card can be played in step 1 in the same way. Another way to play step 1 is to use the consequence scenario map board. The goal here is to draw a map from causes to consequences, that is, linking the trigger card to impacts, which in turn may generate other impacts. Let's take an example with the trigger card "Competitors develop new promising curricula," which is placed at the center of the map. There may be multiple impacts, and one impact placed at the top of the board is the number of national students. More competitors developing new promising curricula will affect negatively the number of national students following the university curriculum. A negative impact is represented by a red arrow. When the cause magnitude increases, the consequence magnitude decreases. Here, more competitors decrease the number of students following the curriculum. Positive impacts are represented by a blue arrow and undefined impacts by a black arrow. In turn, the number of national students may affect the financial resources of the university, represented by a blue arrow, meaning that both variables evolve in the same direction. An increase in the number of national students at the university leads to an increase of the financial resources of the university. At the end, a map representing the complexity of interaction between a trigger and multiple impacts is generated. The process can be repeated with other triggers. Let's play step 2, identifying keystone vulnerabilities. For playing step 2, players need the curriculum ID cards for the basic scenarios A or B, the curriculum ID canvas in the advanced scenario, and the resilience board. In step 2, the objective of a team is to make an assessment of the resilience of the curriculum with respect to the triggers played in step 1. Players use the resilience board for that sake. The resilience board has 2 dimensions. The horizontal axis measures the sensitivity of the curriculum to the trigger. Sensitivity is expressed both by the number of components of the curriculum affected by the trigger or by the importance for the curriculum of the affected component. For example, if the number of students is an important factor for the curriculum and the trigger affects the number of students, then the curriculum is sensitive to the trigger. The vertical axis is a measure of the preparedness of the curriculum to the given trigger. For example, new competitors may emerge, but the curriculum is prepared from a too harsh diminution of the number of students by the reputation the curriculum may have. The preparedness may be low, expressed by not prepared, or high, expressed by prepared. High resilience, that is the bottom left quadrant, is the case where the curriculum has low sensitivity and is well prepared. Low resilience at the top right is when the curriculum is lowly prepared and sensitive to the trigger. The 2 remaining quadrants are sensitive but prepared and not prepared but not sensitive. The most critical triggers are, of course, those with low resilience. 2 triggers played in step 1 are placed by player as not prepared but not sensitive and sensitive but prepared. Let's play step 3, building adaptive capacity. For playing step 3, players need action cards, the vulnerability board, and the solution board. Step 3 is about the decisions to be made for increasing the resilience of a curriculum. First, players must decide which are the problematic triggers to focus on. Second, players must find a solution to increase the resilience of their own curriculum for the problematic triggers. For deciding on which triggers to focus on, a team will use the vulnerability board. The vulnerability board has 2 dimensions. The vertical axis is a projection of the 4 quadrants from the Step 2 resilience board. The 2 quadrants not prepared but not sensitive and sensitive but prepared are merged into one which is not prepared or sensitive. The 2 other quadrants are also reported on the vertical axis, the low resilience quadrants being at the top of the vertical axis. The horizontal axis measures the likelihood of appearance of the trigger event and goes from very unlikely, that is something that happens every 50 years, like the case of the COVID-19 crisis, to likely to happen every 10 years, and finally to highly probable, that is, happens within 5 years. Given that an assessment of the resilience of the trigger was already made in Step 2, in this step, players must therefore make an additional judgment of the likelihood of the trigger cards played in Step 1 by placing them along the horizontal axis. The decision rule for choosing among the trigger cards would be to take first the lowest resilient ones having a high probability of appearance. Therefore, triggers on the top quadrants with crosses should be examined and treated first in the solution step. The last decision step requires building resilience capacities against the problematic triggers and uses the solution board, concentrating first on identifying a problem and proposing a solution. For this, a team chooses one of the triggers identified as problematic and places it on the solution board. Then the team chooses action cards with the objective to resolve the problems caused by the trigger. Teams can also decide to complete the solution canvas by addressing the last 3 quadrants. That is, who is concerned by the deployment of the solution, who is impacted, what is the expected impact of the solution once deployed, and finally the ease by which the solution can be deployed. The last 3 quadrants could be avoided in the basic scenarios and are adapted for the advanced scenario where Sucre is played for a decision aid objective. All problematic triggers are dealt with in turn. All information can be found on our website. Thank you for using Sucre and enjoy Sucre, which after all means sugar in